I had this friend who was much older. I guess he was like 35 or 36. For whatever reason, he liked to hang out with teens and people in their early 20s. I met him through my friends, and he was very popular. Many of my friends were in bands, and we generally attended gigs together, etc. And this guy was known to know a lot about punk rock, local bands, people you should know as aspiring musicians, old cult status bands and their members. He had his own apartment, which isn't something many people in their 20s have in my country, so it was very cool to be able to hang out at his. He was a semi-professional sportsman, had a vast collection of music, and always had lots of food and weed. He kinda liked me, or so I thought. We would exchange flirty texts on a daily basis, and it was great. I kinda liked him too. He was a good-looking guy, but I always felt like something was wrong whenever he started to get flirty or whatever. All was right when we were just texting, but in person, it just felt weird. He just didn't sit right with me. I didn't know why. I couldn't pinpoint that feeling to anything about him in particular. I was at his apartment often with my friends, but would never stay alone. Often I went there thinking, okay, this is it, let's have some fun, with my girlfriends all excited for me too, but would change my mind as soon as he opened the door. One day my best friend visited me. She normally lives in another country and she isn't from my city or area at all. She has only been here a few times to visit me. That's going to be important later. Also, note that we are both what you could call petite. She knew all about this guy and how I kinda liked him but wasn't sure, blah blah. So of course, as soon as she came, the two of us went to visit him. We were alone at his apartment and they seemed to get along well, so I was calm and happy. We had some pasta that he made and I had some wine. My best friend said she didn't want any, which seemed a little strange, but I didn't ask why. We had a nice afternoon when he suddenly asked if we wanted to go to a party with him. He was going soon and we could go with him. Of course I said sure. Didn't even ask where to and with whom. I just figured we were going somewhere in the city, and I would definitely meet many people I know there. I was really popular back then and had many friends in my mid-sized hometown. No worries at all. Then two of his friends, both around his age, came over to pick us up. But as soon as we left his apartment complex, I realized we were going in the wrong direction, leaving the city behind. Only then did I ask where we were going, and they explained that their other friend had a farm far away on the outskirts of the city. I had a vague idea where that was. I still wasn't nervous at that point, as I still figured that since it was supposed to be quite a big gathering, surely there would be people I know. We arrived. The area was huge with many greenhouses, a trailer where the guy lived, and an old farmhouse, which was quite far away and where his parents lived. In some of the greenhouses there was weed growing in between tomatoes. That was the supplier that my friend always had his weed from. There weren't that many people there, and almost exclusively guys. The only other girls were much older than us, hippies and very stoned, chilling with their boyfriends. We were definitely the youngest ones there. This started to make me feel anxious, but the overall vibe was good and very chill. The guys who were talking to us, despite the obvious age difference, were all very nice, no stupid innuendos or anything of the sort. So when my guy friend offered beer, I took it without thinking much. My best friend was offered drinks too, but she didn't want any. We sat around the fire, and this is when things got blurry for me. In fact, the next thing I remember is laying in my bed the next morning, very hungover. I remembered nothing from the night, so the rest of the story is based on what my friend told me. As I had my beer, just one and a little wine consumed hours before that, way less than what would normally get me drunk, I started to act wild. She used the word slutty. I apparently started kissing the guy I knew hard, in front of everybody else near the fire. She was a little shocked but thought I wanted it. Then I sat on top of him, kissing and practically riding him right there. His friend came over and asked if he could get a kiss too, and I complied, started kissing him too. This is when she started to worry, as this wasn't how I behaved at all. She noticed the guy wink at my friend, and they exchanged smiles and winks with their other friends. All the while, another person tried to make my friend drink something too. She said she didn't drink alcohol, but they insisted she had juice or water then. Luckily, she didn't. Then the guy I knew asked the one living on the farm if we could use some privacy of one of the greenhouses and lifted me up and started to walk that way. Right at this moment, my little brave friend stood up, protested that, yelled for him to leave me alone, and said we are going back. Some of the other people, not from the group of friends we stayed with, who were busy with themselves earlier, started noticing something was going on, so the guy let me go. She said our taxi is waiting for us, and we left. There was no taxi there. It was midnight at this point, and we were alone on some rural road. No one followed us though, so it was good, but she was very scared the whole time. She walked, dragging me behind her to see the sign closest to the property, and was able to read the name of the place, as she had no idea where we were, and she was too afraid to ask the people at the party. Then she called a cab and waited with me for half an hour until it arrived. She had no idea what my parents' address was too, so she had to navigate my city as they went. But she did it. My house is right on the main street and has a distinctive mural on one side, so she was able to spot it. She found the keys in my purse and got me to the safety of my bed. If it wasn't for her, I would probably get sexually assaulted on that farm. And I guess it wouldn't be by this one dude only. She said she was vigilant due to what I told her about the guy before she even came here. The "I like him but something's not right" part. And that is why she didn't drink anything for the whole afternoon and night. She is the best, and definitely the smarter one of the two of us. I was 17 when this story happened, 3 years ago now. I was working at an old pizza shop right on the edge of my town. For context, the town I was in is an affluent suburban town, surrounded by a bypass that loops around the town. Around my town is some farmland and main roads, where all of the blue-collar workers moved to after the town was gentrified 15 years back. This pizza shop was around for 20 years and was very catered to these same blue-collar workers. It was around 9 p.m. when a call came in for 2 pizzas and a 2-liter of soda. I was the only driver in, so I had to take the delivery out. It was about a 10-minute drive to get to the location. There I had to drive up a long gravel driveway that took 5 minutes to get up. My car really couldn't handle the gravel and how rough it was. Arriving at the place, I saw a nice house and 2 barns plotted across the land, with wheat 5 to 6 feet tall surrounding the whole property. I've always been really anxious around farms because of how creepy I think they are. Being at this place when I felt truly all alone really started to make my anxiety flare. I decided to call the number on the order because I had no idea where this guy wanted me to go and drop off his food. After about another 5 minutes of absolute silence, the man picked up. He had a very deep and raspy voice like he had been a career smoker, which didn't do anything to help me feel better. I was told to meet him at his truck at the far barn on his property. I was now properly shitting myself as my mind raced with all of the worst possible things that could happen to me. I pulled myself together and mustered the courage to proceed further into this guy's property. I saw the man's truck as I rounded one of those cylinder storage units, where I saw his F-150 and him inside. Instead of getting out, I called him and asked him how we should do the transaction. In that same deep voice, he instructed me to get out of my car and put all of the food onto his truck bed. Since he paid with his credit card already, I thought this would have been over in 10 seconds. I did what he told me to do and walked over to the passenger window so that he could sign his receipt. The man looked to be around his mid-40s, heavy set, with a scraggly black beard and a trucker hat. I'm a pretty skinny guy, so with my mind already racing about being kidnapped or murdered, I really didn't feel safe around this guy. I asked him if he had a pen on him because I forgot to bring one, and he did not have any cash on him. He stared at me with these cold eyes and pointed into the back of his truck, saying to me, "If you ask me for a tip, I'm going to be sticking this tip down your fucking throat," where he had a double-barrel shotgun just in the back of his car. I was frozen in fear as I registered that this man had just threatened to kill me. The only thing I could muster out was, "Okay," and I got back into my car and got out of that farm. I drove 80 all the way back to the pizza parlor where I told my coworkers what happened. None of my coworkers took me seriously and just thought I was playing this up for a joke. I went home and forgot about it pretty quickly, but a year later I was working the lunch shift, and the same man called in and ordered a pizza. At this point, I refused to take this order, but this was during COVID, and the place was on its last legs already, so management forced me to go anyway. It was only 2 p.m. on a Sunday, so at least my fear of the dark would be covered. I got there, and the man was waiting for me at his actual house. He recognized me, and out of all things, started apologizing to me for what he said. He was excusing it, saying that he just started going through a divorce and was struggling with his emotions. I just wanted the whole thing to be over with, and he gave me $60 for what happened. I just learned of this story over the weekend when my Uncle S was in town. He has always been a jokester, and growing up, he'd always be pulling pranks and laughing. I don't think I'd ever seen him serious before this moment. He is a huge car fan and asked to see my new Infiniti G37 sedan, so I took him out in my grandpa's driveway to show him the car with my dad. We did the usual pop the hood and rev the engine type stuff, and we all pretended that we knew what we were looking at as we stared into the hood of the car, when my uncle said he wanted to tell us about something that happened to him in college that he felt would serve as a good lesson to me. This is honestly the first time I'd ever heard him talk very seriously, with a tone of fear in his voice. He trembled as he first started telling the story and said that he hadn't ever told anyone about this before, but seeing me with my new car and the fact that I'm a young guy made him want to bestow some knowledge upon me. My uncle went to a rural college. The campus was in the middle of a town of about 10,000 people. Most were college students or worked at the college, but there were some locals. He moved off campus his junior year and lived about 3 miles outside town in the bar districts. After having quite a few beers with his friends, he decided he better walk home since he had an exam that morning. As he was walking down the country road with cornfields on both sides, a man in a truck pulled up who appeared to be a friendly farmer. He offered to give my uncle a lift to save him the walk. My uncle, being drunk and not thinking straight, took him up on his offer. He got in the front seat and they took off. He gave the man directions to the house he lived in with his college buddies, and then about 5 minutes into the drive, he noticed that the man had gone past the turn he needed to take. He informed the man that his house was behind them and he needed to turn around, but the older farmer man said that he'd lived in this town for 50 years and knew a shortcut he would teach him. That's when my uncle began to get suspicious. He started asking questions and surveying his situation. The farmer obviously had a final destination as he continued down the road, then eventually pulled into an old driveway with a very old barn that was falling apart. My uncle said the roof was halfway caved in. My uncle's plan was to bolt the second the man slowed down, so when the farmer slowed down and parked, my uncle pushed the unlock latch and gave the door a shove. The lock had been sawed off, and only part of it popped up. At this point, he knew he was in for it. The driveway was made of gravel, and there was a very old playground set in the front yard that was completely rusted and falling apart. There was also a shed in the back of the property, behind the barn, that he said had lights on, but the rest of the property was dark and only illuminated by the headlights of the truck and the moon. My uncle ended the story then very abruptly with, "Then I fought him off and sprinted home," and said, "Let's go back inside." My dad stared at him the rest of the night and he kept to himself. I don't think he wanted to admit it, but something obviously happened at that farm.